tayo sa mundo. Maraming salamat.
Welcome everyone. Good evening, magandang gabi, and maayong gabi sa tanang Bisaya na minaw karong gabi. We would like to extend our warmest thanks for everyone joining us today in the second Material Connection webinar, brought to you by Design Center of the Philippines and the Material Connection with partners MATIC Hub and the Philippine Trade Training Center. I am Patricia Kyle Mendoza. Just call me Pat, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. In celebration of this year's World Industrial Design Day theme and in support of the Cebu Creative City of Design initiatives, the Design Center of the Philippines and Material Connection partnered to present this webinar entitled Focusing on Diversity for Material Innovation and Selection. To give you a glimpse of our webinar and what it's all about, here are some poll questions. So feel free to share your answers and make sure to hang around later on because we'll be sharing all of your answers from tonight. So let's move on to the very first poll question. So number 1, how are you feeling today? Yep, be honest. Are you shaking? So number 1, are you excited? Are you nervous? Or are you curious? Or lastly, are you not yet sure about how you feel? Feel free, send in your answers. All right. Next one. So I'm sure this is a question that we all can relate to, especially back in 2020 and even up to now. So second question, where do you buy your food? Or where did you start buying your food, especially during the pandemic, especially during the time when, everything started to close down? Did you go online? Did you go to deliveries? Or did you go to the wet market, supermarkets? Did you go to your local neighborhood tito and tita in their carinderia? Or, have you done all of the above? Be honest. I'm sure we all have our GrabMart or Shopee or Food Panda preferences. Okay, third poll question. So especially, as we have our work from home setups, as we sort of try to work with home, you kind of start to notice the different materials that are around you, that you surround yourself with. So like the next poll question that we have, which local materials can you find in your house? Look around you, either in raw form or as a finished product, as your favorite coffee mug or whatever. Which local materials can you find in your house? A, bamboo. B, abaca. C, pandan. D, shells. E, coconut. Or is it a different kind of material? And if it is, feel free to share in the comments. Okay, lastly, for the designers out there, especially the design students, those who want to become future designers here in the Philippines, what local materials have you used in your products? Or you don't have to have used it, but like what local materials would you wish to use in your product designs? A, bamboo. B, abaca. C, raffia. D, capiz. E, coconut. F, rattan. Or is it something else entirely? Feel free to share. Let us know in the comment section. All right, so those are our poll questions. Again, make sure to hang around later. We're going to be sharing everyone's answers later on. We're excited to know what you think and what your answers are. But before we formally proceed, let us hear the welcome remarks from the Design Center of the Philippines' very own Executive Director, Ms. Rhea Matute.
Hi, good morning, Andrew. Maayong gabi, Cebu. Good evening to all. It's our honor to once again host alongside Material Connection, our first material webinar series in 2021. Not to correct Pat, she's correct that it is the second, but for 2021, it is our first webinar series. And as Pat mentioned, this series is focusing on diversity for material innovation and selection in celebration of the World Industrial Design Day 2021 with its theme diversity. To designers, materials are the building blocks of design. It is the material that dictates what we can and what we cannot make. Good design is about selecting the right materials for what we want to achieve, for our design to perform, to be of lasting benefit and delight to the consumer. The material matters. This is why we need to know about materials. And if we are lucky enough, develop our own materials to add to our design language. This is why Design Center is part of Material Connections Global Network, to provide this kind of material information and gain access to information on the most innovative materials around the world to offer solutions and inspirations to designers, architects, engineers, material scientists, and specifiers. For this evening, we are very honored to not only partner with the Philippine Trade Training Center as our broadcast partner, but with MATIC Hub in Cebu as part of our commitment to support Cebu as a UNESCO Creative City of Design. In fact, it is a Cebu company, Nature's Legacy, that was the first Philippine company to be included in Material Connections Library of Innovative Materials. So it's only fitting to have as our first event partner, for the Material Connection webinar series, to have Cebu and MATIC Hub as our partner. Thank you, Butch Karungay and Pat Mendoza, for making this possible. And we hope that this partnership would be a lasting partnership between Design Center and the MATIC Hub and Material Connection. So without further ado, I pass on the floor, the virtual floor, to Pat and to Andrew to start this evening's webinar.
Thank you, Idirea, for that warm welcome. We're excited for today's design discussion. And really, it's so true. Design matters. Design is not just, it's not just drawing, it's not just a product, but it actually brings inspiration and solutions to a lot of the problems that we face now. We would also like to acknowledge, of course, MATIC Hub Cebu, that's us. I'd like to thank also Butch and Angie who are here, for everyone who is listening, and our official event partner, the Philippine Trade Training Center, or PTTC, who is our official broadcast partner. Thank you so much, everyone who has made this event possible. Today, we are joined by Dr. Andrew Dent, Executive Vice President of Material Connection. He is also co-author of the Material Innovation book series from Thames and Hudson, and is a sought-after speaker on sustainable material strategies at events such as TED NYC. One of the world's experts on materials, Dr. Dent helps startups and Fortune 500 companies take their products to the next level with unexpected material solutions. Just a little reminder before we start our webinar, for any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your control panel. I will bring them up during our Q&A and fireside chat segment after the presentation. And again, for the latest updates, future discussions, and different events on the design economy in the Philippines and everything design, make sure to follow at DTI Design Center of the Philippines. And also, to fully experience our webinar tonight, make sure to keep your side-by-side view on Zoom. So before, I don't want to hold up everyone, but Andrew, please take the floor and enlighten us.
Thank you so much, Pat, and thank you also, Ria, for that introduction. So thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the time, the opportunity to be able to talk to you today. I'm going to be spending about 45 minutes on the topic of diversity. I've put together a presentation for you. I want to go through that and cover as many different areas as I can. So we're going to travel around a little bit when it comes to the word diversity. I wanted to tackle it from a range of different directions. So you'll see all sorts of different influences, material specific, yes, of course, but also considering that diversity, a lot of the diversity has to do with us as humans. So I'm going to be considering the human aspect within design and material selection as well. So let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Good, okay, great. So yes, focusing on diversity for material innovation and selection. Okay, so let's just dive in. I want to sort of, so first of all, I want to explain what I believe this to be. Now, diversity and material innovation is a topic which I guess isn't well known, but it is certainly there. It's certainly important. It does influence an awful lot of the choices we make, but I kind of wanted to bring to the forefront what that actually means. I want to also include supply chain diversity. We've been hit by a pandemic, and I think that we've seen some of the challenges we have with supply chain. I think therefore we can understand a little bit more the importance of diversity within that supply chain. Diversity in material businesses, that's really just, that's the human aspect. You know, if we look at who runs the material businesses, who gets to profit, who gets to make choices, I want to call attention to that area as well. Let's not forget universal design. You know, it's been around for a number of years, but I think there are many tenets, many principles from universal design that can flow over into diversity, and we can learn an awful lot from that aspect of design. And I want to talk specifically about materials and within the Philippines, within that region of the world, how do we diversify our material selection, and give you an outlook, sort of what do I think the future holds. Okay. So if we think about what is diversity in material innovation, I want to bring up a couple of very well-known and understandable aspects. Simple idea is, okay, it's the ability to choose different materials in order to solve the same problem. Bicycle frame, ubiquitous, you know, known throughout the world, an incredible innovation, and one that's been played with for many years. And here we can see the variations of material choices in order to solve the same problem. Each material has different aspects to it. Each material brings different performance aspects, but also different aesthetic aspects as well. If we look at the image on the bottom right, there you can see the standard steel or titanium frame. There you can play around with quite complex designs, but the assumption is you're going to be welding that material together, welding or brazing. So there's a limitation as to how the material is put together. One doesn't typically glue metals. It's not the strongest way to put them together. However, if you look at things such as bamboo, we need to use glues because you can't weld a bamboo. So therefore, there are different material choices lead to different requirements when it comes to putting that product together. Carbon fiber, the sort of most well-known, and the shape of that product has changed the frame itself. The main points are the same, but if you look at the actual design, you can create a much more curved and sculpted form as a result of the ability of carbon fiber to flow and form over much more curved and less angled joints. So therefore, there's a reason why that product looks the way it does. It's predominantly because of the material chosen. So it shows that to solve one problem, we can actually use a variety of different materials. It's not we're stuck with one material to solve a material problem. Sometimes it is supply chain challenges. All of these materials can be used to manufacture viscose or rayon. So I've got one product which is a viscose or rayon shirt. They are used widely. It's a synthetic alternative that has a raw material source. So although it looks and feels like an artificial silk, it actually comes from renewable materials. And traditionally, it's come from wood. But I can also use bamboo. I can use waste cotton. I can use waste cellulose from things such as jeans. I can use scrap paper. I can also use agricultural waste as well. So I'm able to produce this one thing, which is my viscose shirt, through all of these different materials. That then allows me to diversify the supply chain. So if for some reason I have a problem with the supply of cotton, if for some reason wood becomes a lot more expensive, then it allows me to then change that raw material and yet still produce the same product. So that to me is a great way in which we can show diversification when you do have supply chain challenges. Sometimes it's for ethical concerns. We've seen leather take a hit over the last 10, 15 years. People are concerned about the killing of animals, the use of large amounts of land for the cultivation of cows. So therefore, we can find alternative materials. And here we can see whether they come from pineapple, whether they come from mushroom materials, whether they come from cactus. So there's a whole range of different materials that can be used as an alternative to leather now. innovation, material innovation has allowed us to replace leather with all of these different options. And these materials can be grown in a wide range of different locations as well. So you therefore no longer need to be a cow producing country in order to solve your leather challenges. Sometimes it's end of life. We know that recycling is a big problem. We know that flexible plastic waste from packaging is a big problem. We know it specifically in the Philippines. So there are ways to solve that. Do we make these materials much more recyclable? Do we make them compostable? So the same challenge, which is flexible packaging, we can solve the end of life challenges by ensuring it is easily recyclable into something else that is useful. We can also make sure that it can be, so whether it's that as recyclable as plastic, recyclable as paper, or potentially we can also make sure that if it does end up out there in the environment, that it composts and breaks down relatively quickly into clean and edible materials for microbes. So material variation, same product, different materials for different end of life solutions. Supply chain diversity. Now, specific to the US, but this is an interesting aspect, is over the last few years, lumber, wood, has increased in price significantly. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. You know, this isn't necessarily just a US problem. Any location where you have variations in consumer demand or the ability to supply that material, you will get changes in price. Just so happens that during the pandemic, a lot of Americans decided that they wanted to build stuff. So prices went up. And then post-pandemic, we've continued that construction boom. So as a result, you get vast changes in the price of basic standard commodity materials. That becomes a challenge. So what happens is, if lumber suddenly goes up to 3 or 4 times the price, then what's the alternative material we can use? Construction can happen through alternative materials. It generates the need for these alternatives, these innovative alternatives. Up until now, lumber was the only material that you would use because it's low cost, it's readily available. But what this does is it spikes companies or individuals into thinking, okay, I now know that lumber, wood is a lot more expensive. So how do I then seize that opportunity as, okay, but previously I couldn't compete with lumber with my new product, but now it's tripled in price, my product is now less expensive. So these types of changes, especially with the pandemic, and I think the pandemic will loom large in a lot of these conversations, because what it shows is that going forward, it is likely we're going to have more disruptions in our day-to-day living. At the moment, over in specifically in the US, we've had huge wildfires which are changing the Western landscape. In Germany, of all places, where they've had massive floods, which are going to cause them to their supply chain is then disrupted. The way of living is then disrupted. And if these types of natural disasters are going to be more and more prevalent, then we need to understand that these types of disruptions in supply chain as well are going to be important, and therefore there are opportunities to be made to diversify the types of materials that can solve any one problem. If wood can no longer be relied upon to make sure it's always the same price, then let's offer some alternatives. Let's diversify that supply chain and the materials that can be offered. Paper towels in the US. And I think this was specific to a particular type of approach that the world had for many years. And I think what we found was that just-in-time manufacturing, now I know I'm diversifying a little bit, I think this is important to understand. Since the 1960s, and a gentleman called, I think it was Toyobo, he worked for Toyota in the 1960s and came over to the US and saw automotive manufacturing, the big players, Chevrolet, Ford, companies like that, and saw that they were really inefficient. So he pioneered this process called just-in-time manufacturing, or lean manufacturing. What that did was it made the whole process more efficient by ensuring you only had enough stock to supply demand for that point, for that time. So it required that you have much better efficiencies, much better control over your supply chain, much better control over your vendors, the people who are selling you stuff. What it did was it improved efficiency, but it also made the whole process a little more brittle. And we've seen that within the pandemic. The reason why we didn't have enough toilet roll in the pandemic wasn't because there wasn't enough toilet roll in the world. It was because due to lean manufacturing and just-in-time manufacturing, It meant that there was only enough supply at that time in that location. Now, within a couple of weeks, we were able to supply a whole bunch more toilet roll. It wasn't the problem. But the challenge is with this type of leanness, it means that during times of disruption, you will have shortages. And we've noticed that, myself personally, in trying to source materials, bio-based materials in particular for clients. Some big clients are wanting to develop new bio-based materials. And unfortunately, there isn't the availability at the moment because of these various different supply chain shortages as a result of the pandemic. So we have to understand that the process that has been working well from the 60s until now may not work so well anymore, simply because we have more uncertain times, and this just-in-time or lean manufacturing is going to be challenged by these types of disruptions. Solutions can be smaller. Multiple fulfillment models, way of actually diversifying the way in which you're getting your materials, and also micro fulfillment centers. It may be that the era of just massive locations of shipping out materials and products may not be the way to go forward. And you need to have smaller locations which are much more adaptable in order to solve these types of problems. Okay. So next, I want to talk about diversity in materials businesses. Now, lots of words, but I kind of want you to spend the time, and we want to go through these. So I think these are important bits of information. We know through spending an awful lot of effort and time and money from intelligent people that diversity is better. Within the workforce, having a wider range of different people, it is better. We know this also within design. Think about the way in which if you're ever you're trying to solve a design problem. If you can bring in more people with more diverse experiences and backgrounds, it is more likely that you will get an innovative and better solution. If I try and solve a problem by myself, I've only got my own thinking, which tends to be relatively narrow. I have a certain experience. I've gone through life in a certain way. I think in certain pathways. So therefore, inevitably, any problem comes along, I'm going to use a certain approach. They have the saying that to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So when you have a certain level of experience, then everything looks like it should be the same way. The way to solve that problem, because you end up then have a limited amount of innovation there, is to bring in people with a diverse range of backgrounds. So we know that happens in design. We know it's an effective design tool to make sure that if you're trying to solve a design problem and you're an engineer, bring in a biologist, bring in an artist, bring in a mathematician, people with different experiences and different ways of thinking about things. That's always likely to solve the problem in a much more creative and interesting and successful way. So we know the workplace is getting older. We know it's also getting more female and also more ethnically diverse. And this is a good thing. We know from people like McKinsey and Harvard Business Review, and you can look at that, company profits and share performances can be close to 50% higher when women are well represented in senior leadership positions. We know that more diverse companies had 19% higher innovation revenues. Business with more racially and ethnically diverse workforces have a 35% performance advantage over those that are homogenous. And in the US, national GDP would increase by 25 billion if just 1% more disabled people were hired. Now, the challenge with this, of course, is that we know this. People who study this tell us this. And so we know that there is a reason to do this. However, it isn't always getting through to the people who actually make the decisions. And I thought this graphic was very interesting because it shows, and now this is specifically within the US, but we can take this for basically global as well. Okay, here you have 4 graphs, okay? You have white women, women of color, white men, and men of color. And if you look at that graph, what happens is from A through to F is the age of and experience of the workforce. So A is an entry-level person. You go through a manager, which is B, senior manager, which is C, a vice president, D, E is senior vice president, and F is C-suite. So the chief executive, the technology officer, the material scientist, whatever. So the top brass. And as we go through, you can see every other group, apart from white men, that number decreases. So although you have a certain number of white women, women of color, men of color, who are entry level, as they go through the level of experience, it gets whittled down to less and less. What happens with white men? People like myself, and we get more and more represented the older we get. So that becomes our challenge, is that although we know from McKinsey, from Harvard Business Review, that we will get better profitability, we will get a better business with greater innovation if we hire a diverse range of people. That we do have people like myself, but we also have people who don't look like me, people who are different ages, different sex, different racial makeup. That we know is going to improve our overall business, but because people like me tend to end up in the C-suite, and we tend to hire people like ourselves, then we limit that innovation, we limit that success. It is basically indifference is the main, you know, so if I was to make a choice, I just like, oh, let me just hire someone who looks like me, because, you know, I know they're going to think like me. That is a challenge within any company. Also, lack of top-level commitment, a commitment by C-suite people to actually say, okay, we are going to hire a wider range of different people. And that second stat, which is blind auditions. When hiring, ensure that you're hiring based upon the person's qualifications, not based upon their name or whether they're a male or female. So we found that if you do it blind and you hire based upon people's performance entirely, you're likely to get a greater range of diversified hirings, and therefore, inevitably, your company will do better. We can do better in this. And my demographic, the older white men, is you know, within the US at least, is largely to blame. But we need to move past those prejudices. We need to try and hire blind based upon people's qualifications, and also make commitments to say, okay, we want to make this company better, more profitable, more successful. We need to hire more diversity. And then an alternative, of course, is if you can start your own company. A good friend of mine, Ginger, she runs the company called Biomason. She was an architect, but interestingly enough, in order to solve the problems she had, she also was turned into a chemist. She was an architect and working in the United Arab Emirates at the time, and she realized that there was an awful lot of concrete construction going up. And thought the problem was, of course, we know with concrete is that for every ton of concrete, you get a ton of carbon dioxide. It's very energy intensive, producing an awful lot of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. So she decided, okay, that's a problem. I need to solve this. So she created a product called Biomason, specifically tiles called Biolith, which are grown by bacteria. It uses limestone and then recycled granite in order to create these tiles. And they use 80% recycled content, and they are actually almost carbon negative in their production. You have these incredible tiles. So she started the company. She got investment, and she's now running. She's now doing commercial production of these tiles. These tiles solve the carbon emissions problem of concrete and cement by simply just using bacteria and recycled material in order to create the same sort of product that a poured cement or concrete product could. She understood the problem. She needed to diversify her own knowledge from architect through to chemist. She hired a wide range of different people in order to work with her business, and now she's got a successful business producing this you know, game-changing solution that is a almost carbon-eating, bio-based, bacteria-grown concrete or cement alternative. That to me is a great example how someone who says, okay, well, I don't like the status quo, I'm going to try and solve it myself. And in doing that, she's able to not just create material innovation, but to create a woman-run business in a traditionally male-run industry, but do it through diverse hiring, through creative thinking, and by also changing the way that she thought herself. She's an architect, moved towards being more of a chemist, and that was enabled her to, as an architect, always think about the end consumer. And this is a good, interesting aspect, is that if this product was created by a chemist, chances are it never would have succeeded, because a chemist thinks about solving chemical problems. An architect thinks about how do I build buildings for people. So that combination of architecture and chemistry, that's what worked. If it was just an architect, they wouldn't have had the knowledge in order to produce the tile. If it was just a chemist, they would have produced a wonderful tile, but not known how to actually then market it and use it for to build buildings. So for me, that's a very interesting aspect, how that diversification of understanding of material properties through architecture and chemistry is what solved the problem. So that is a great example of how this is possible. So I want to talk briefly about universal design. Now, hopefully everyone knows what that is, and then this tile should hopefully give you an example. You know, it's sort of in the same way that circular economy has evolved out of sustainability. Diversity, you know, in design has evolved out of universal design. Universal design is designing for the many, designing for the all. You know, and I think for many years we didn't. We designed for, again, the person who was the designer or the engineer, which, you know, in whatever location or country tends to be male, tends to be a certain demographic. So that then the design tends to be for those people. So when I'm designing, I think about what are my problems. When I think about a challenge, how would I solve it as my, you know, as a certain type of person? So universal design tries to turn that on the head. It's been around for a number of years, and you know, is now considered more mainstream. But I think, you know, diversity in design has sort of evolved out of this, because I think we understood that universal design typically is based upon physical. So it thinks about hard of hearing, those are partially sighted, those that are wheelchair bound, people who perhaps are different sizes, children, adults, large and small. It thinks about physicality. Diversity in design thinks about that, but also thinks about different people's shared experiences. So my experience of the world is very different than perhaps a woman of color. We walk through the world differently. So therefore, I think diversity in design that sort of takes it beyond just the physical and then becomes also lived experience. And then how do we design based upon universal design? How do we incorporate that into diversity? Avoid them and us. It's not me as the designer or me as the material engineer and then them. It's all of us. We need to design thinking about everybody and not differentiate between the person who makes the decisions and the person who receives the results. We need to think about everybody in those decisions. Again, same thing with diversity of business hiring. Work across scale, sector, discipline, process. Try and cover as many different areas as you can. Think about as many different areas as you can to understand all of the potential eventualities. And of course, with every business, consistent communication and collaboration. Make sure that you're always talking the same language and you're talking it to everybody. And you only feel like you've solved the problem when all parties are heard and designed for. So even if it is a very small demographic, then you need to consider, you know, are they being listened to in this design process? And because the consequences can be deadly. Crash test dummies for many, many years were, as you can see on the left-hand side, a certain size and a certain sex. That doesn't really deal with someone who can be, you know, 1 or 2 feet shorter than that person. So all of the design and safety measures for, let's say, the inside of a car were designed based upon people who are a certain size and certain shape. We've improved upon that, and now more modern design has, but there's still, that sort of challenge still exists. And this one perhaps is more relevant for today. These are 2 images. The image on the left, that N95 mask fits very well for that gentleman, but it doesn't necessarily fit very well for a woman because the shape of the face is different. So how do we make sure that this sort of mask, which can, you know, can be a life or death consideration, whether the mask fits well or not, it needs to fit on all different shapes. And the image on the right-hand side was actually a woman. She is a first responder and an emergency worker in the UK working in a London hospital. Now you can see the PPE stuff that she works with, it just doesn't fit her face at all. She has a smaller head, she's a smaller person, but the job she does is exactly the same as someone who is my size, 6'6". Yet the product she is using, it clearly does not fit her head very well. It hasn't been designed, and the consequences can be deadly. She's working in a highly dangerous situation where she has people with COVID, and she needs to basically make sure that she is protected so she can continue to do her job. those products that she's currently wearing do not fit her well and therefore do not protect her adequately. So these are some of the consequences that we have when we don't think about design for all. So this is, diversity came from universal design. Universal design is thinking about design for all, but this again shows the diversity in consideration for everybody you're designing for. I think this teamed with the supply chain diversity says that there are, and also with a lot of the businesses we have been helping over the last 2 or 3 years, perhaps even 5 years, have been smaller businesses with niche products. Let's take something as well known as the fashion industry, okay? There now are a whole range of new designers and companies that are producing niche products. And those niche products can be sold to a niche audience with the internet, with the ability to search for a range of different needs, with better supply chain management and better control of shipment. It is possible to create products for a very much smaller group of people because you can pinpoint those people much more effectively. The time before, you had to produce one type of product in a range of sizes because you weren't able to reach your customer that effectively. You could only do it through large ad campaigns and also making sure that your product was available in many different locations around the country. Nowadays, with a lot of e-commerce, we can solve that problem by simply just targeting very specific groups of people. We can target them through social media. We can target them through understanding better their needs and their likes and dislikes. So therefore, it is possible now to create entire fashion businesses based around a very small niche set of people, because you can get loyal customers and sell to them time and again and listen to them more effectively and solve problems for them more effectively. So I think that the challenge that companies like some of the large companies will have is that how do they then effectively solve this diversity in design? If I've got one store which needs to try and cater for everybody who's around that store, I'm going to have limited success because a lot of people now know that they can get exactly what they need through much more niche shopping. So I think the advent of a much smaller niche design and production is going to be the way forward. And I wonder how some of the larger brands are going to deal with this. Because I think now I can choose a very specific type of product based on exactly what I want, and there's likely to be a manufacturer out there, a brand out there who can do it for me. They're never going to make, they're never going to become a huge brand, but they can solve their mission, which is so they can be true to their mission, which is to produce a certain type of product for a certain type of person and to sell enough of that to be profitable and successful. In my final section, I want to talk about diversifying material selection. Now, I put this slide up because I was talking to Ria about how a number of years ago in the Philippines, there had been a design sort of project where we got a range of different designers to think differently about the materials that were indigenous to the Philippines. And I would say, the project worked well. It got an awful lot of press, and I think it had success. I think the challenge was also always, how do we make a universal product that can be accessible to all people from some of these materials? So the design was great, the marketing was great, the production, because we weren't exactly sure who we were trying to sell to, that's where it fell down. So the manufacturing process, so we could, design was great. The materials were a great solution. It was well received as an idea and as products. But then, of course, ultimately, the manufacturing and sale to a particular demographic, that's where it fell down. I think this is where there is a chance for hope, which is the ability to produce a niche product from a material that's been locally sourced can then be sold to people around the world who have a desire for that niche product. So I think there is the opportunity to sell perhaps in slightly lower volumes, but in a much more targeted way. And the materials sourced locally, I think, are possibly one of the best ways to go, because then it solves a lot of the supply chain problems. It was interesting. I was working with a client who sells liquor, and they had a wonderful liquor box, and it was packaged in a wood box. they were selling it in, the company itself was in Ireland, and they were selling it in the UK. Now, in order to produce that wood box that went around the liquor bottle as a presentation box, they purchased the wood from the west coast of the United States. They then had it manufactured in China, and then had it shipped all the way back to the UK. Now that, to me, it was claimed to try and, the woods were trying to show a sort of sustainable product, and how it was more just sort of local and sort of natural and authentic. But unfortunately, raw material in America, manufactured in China, sold to the UK market, it was anything but. So I think they were trying to change that, because they'd lost that level of authenticity. They'd lost that claim that this was a sustainable product, because it might be made out of wood, but it's been shipped halfway around the world, well, all the way around the world, in order to be manufactured. So I think consumers now are looking for more authentic products. They're looking for a more authentic story. So the ability to source locally, for me, is of great importance. So I think, for production in the Philippines, looking for local sourcing and then manufacture. Yes, of course, you might then get clients who want to purchase it, and then you can send it around the world. But I think that at least the sourcing, design, and production within one location gives a level of authenticity, which I think a lot of consumers now value. I think we are moving away from a period where we didn't care what our things are made of, that we didn't care where they were made. I'm sure within the Philippines, the same as every other country in the world, there is a pride in things that are locally sourced. There is a pride in manufacturing that is local, in making sure that your own nation profits from the hard work of and also is also to use its raw materials successfully. So I think that there is a greater opportunity now to produce products that are locally sourced, that are designed locally, that are targeted towards a specific range of people, not necessarily for anybody. It's also possible to design, as long as they understand that the design itself is universal, then you can actually target it towards people who like a certain type of thing, even though they can be from any nationality, they can be any ability that So I think there's a certain level of universality, even though you can actually target a niche group. And as always, I'm a great believer in waste. What can we do with the stuff that we throw away? And I think there is also an opportunity as well. Although the materials that are indigenous to the Philippines, there isn't an awful lot of very high-tech solutions there. There's a lot more natural materials. You do import and use an awful lot of high-tech materials that are simply just then discarded at the end of their life. What can we do with those? That, to me, is also local sourcing. Can you use a range of different waste materials that are then produced, are clean, synthesized, and manufactured into high-quality products? There are enough small manufacturing processes that are able to solve this problem of sorting, cleaning, and then ensuring the high quality of waste materials. It doesn't need to be a product that looks a dirty gray or a dirty brown, just looks a little speckled because it's a whole bunch of waste materials. There are enough manufacturing processes now that enable us to clean and sort and produce again using waste materials, but in a high quality, wonderfully colored and uniform way. So I think there's an awful lot of potential value. So don't discount the locally sourced waste materials as well as the things you can find indigenous to the Philippines. So an outlook. Diversity says that we should try and avoid single location sourcing. We've seen that in you can produce a product in a range of different ways from a range of different materials. It's also possible to diversify the material options through design. Does your design enable you to use different materials for the same solution? So that is partially a design option. So you notice how changing design of bicycle frames, and that's a design way of enabling us to produce the same product by different ways. I would recommend, although it's been around for a little while, apply the ideas of universal design to material selections. And tech. We use technology for all sorts of different things, but what it does, it allows us to pinpoint our consumer, but it also allows us to find different ways of sourcing for inventory, of recycling and cleaning waste products. New tech can actually, and also especially the internet, allows us to have a lot greater control and understand knowledge about the different sources that we can use. Previously, it would only be, a lot of our clients say, okay, well, our vendors are only offering us these 3 materials, so we're using these 3 materials. Well, nowadays, you can move beyond that. You don't necessarily have to rely upon just the people you currently know. You can go out to the world and find solutions from all over the place. So the technology brings an awful lot of the world a lot closer, and also allows us to source and solve in a lot more streamlined way through using technology. And my final one is, when you can, keep it local. I mean, I think there is an authenticity and a value to solving problems locally for your local population, as long as it's universal design based. And then think about ways in which you can use the materials that are indigenous or waste materials to solve through that process. Keeping it local, because I think we're increasingly eschewing and moving away from this, I guess, anonymous and global manufacturing process. The pandemic has shown us that we need to be a little bit more adaptable, a little more flexible, and that what's important to us is what's closest to us. Thank you so much. Hopefully that kind of gave you an understanding of where I was with diversity and material selection. I covered a whole bunch of different topics, but I think they're all relevant. And I think also they hopefully give you a better understanding about the way we think. And I think also the way that you should probably also think when it comes to material selection, material sourcing, and the way that you design.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for that. Very insightful, very informative, and just a whole lot. There was so much in there that we could apply, and it's so relevant for what's happening now in the world, not just in the Philippines, but the entire world, actually. It's great to learn about all these different material innovations that we have all over the world, especially as you mentioned with the presence of tech. It's so easy now to just do a Google search and look for solutions. I'm trying to put everything in a nutshell, but as you've mentioned, and just one of the wonderful insights that you've said, we can do better when it comes to design. Material diversity, it not only enables people to find solutions, but at the same time, it combats indifference. Material diversity, on the larger scale of things, it creates design solutions, and these design solutions hit all of the sustainable development goals. And essentially, or in an ideal future, material diversity could help us to create a more sustainable and more inclusive future for all. And I'm mind blown, and I hope everyone else has a lot of questions later on. But before we proceed with that, speaking of inclusive design, speaking of diversity in design, of course, here in the Philippines, we have the DTI Design Center of the Philippines. And the Design Center has always been one of the greatest promoters and supporters of design in the Philippines, not just the design communities, not just designers, but at the same time, the DCP is working towards promoting and bringing the design economy in the Philippines to the next level. So one of these initiatives is #DesignCountsPH. So #DesignCountsPH is the pioneering design economy mapping of the Philippines by the Design Center in partnership with the British Council, and it analyzes the economic contribution and value chain of the design industry by mapping the country's design innovation ecosystem. The outputs and results of this initiative will guide the formulation of the very first national design policy. So we just go back to doing better with design and diversity in design, as Andrew was talking about earlier. And a lot of times diversity also means that we as designers, we as people who are part of the creative community have to take part in initiatives such as this. So we need your data, we need your input. Help us fill in the gaps. So we are inviting everyone here, participants, researchers, educators, and innovators to answer our survey and help us build the future of the Philippine design nation. Make design count. So flashed on the screen, Was it there? Yeah. So flashed on the screen is the QR code for the survey. Make sure to take a picture and make sure to give in your answers. And then the other initiative of the Design Center in the Philippines is the Good Design Award. So once again, we need your input. We need you to take part, and we need you to really just, stand up and participate. The Department of Trade and Industry, through the Design Center of the Philippines, holds the Good Design Award in the Philippines this 2021. So Good Design Award Philippines is envisioned to be the country's premier design recognition platform that nurtures the culture of design excellence through creativity, innovation, value creation, and impact. This is held every 2 years, and Good Design Award Philippines recognizes outstanding designs from local artists, designers, and businesses that exemplify the design principles of form, function, and innovation, plus the Filipino value of malasakit. So keep that in mind: form, function, innovation, and of course, malasakit. By stressing the importance of malasakit in good design, the Good Design Award Philippines shines its light on design's ability to improve lives and to address social, economic, and environmental sustainability issues. Watch out for more announcements on the official Facebook page of the DTI Design Center of the Philippines, or visit the website by scanning the QR code on the screen. You can also send us an email at gooddesignawarph@designcenter.gov.ph. So, do you have what it takes? Make sure to send in your input. So, I hope Andrew has had his break. Have you had your water, Andrew, your coffee? We are going to be moving on to our fireside chat. And also, we will be sharing the results of the poll. So can we share that, please? All right. Number 1. So how are you feeling today? What were the answers? Okay, 35% excited, 2% nervous. Oh no, I thought it was 80% nervous, but that's good. So 53% curious and 10% not yet sure. We hope at the end of this presentation, of this entire webinar, you will be 100% sure of how you feel. Let's move over to the next one, please. All right. So where do you buy your food items, especially during the pandemic? So 24%, of course, answered online deliveries, Food Panda. We have our GrabMart, Grab deliveries. Wet market and supermarkets is 31%. This is interesting. So only 2% bought from local neighborhood carinderias. That's interesting. And 43% said all of the above. Okay, thank you for that. And then next poll question, please. All right, which local materials can be found in your house right now? 39% said bamboo. Great. 20% abaca, 7% pandan, 10% said shells, 15% coconut, and 10% answered other materials. But that's great to know. It's more than just plastic in the house. That's great. All right. Let's move over to the next one. Oh wait, was that the last one? Okay, very last question. For the designers out there, for the design students out there, what local materials have you used in your products? So, okay, bamboo seems to be pretty famous here. Okay, popular. Bamboo is again 27%, abaca 17%, raffia 4%, capiz shells is 10%, coconut 4%. Again, so we have our first runner-up, rattan. So very common in furniture, very common in home decor, that's 29%. And everything else is 8%. That's really good to know. Thank you, everyone, for sending in your answers to the poll questions. Now we head over to the fireside chat. Are you ready, Andrew?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Wow, lots of questions. Okay, let's start with, okay. Oh, okay. So there is a question here from Butch. Hi, Butch. He said, absolutely love that BioLith idea. Is the product available in the Philippines?
What product did you say?
This was the BioLith cement brick by Ginger.
Yes, it is. It can get shipped over. At the moment, the production is really just in, I think it's in the US and also in the United Arab Emirates. So 2 locations at the moment. They are hoping to manufacture, get it more universally known. The challenge, of course, with any replacement to concrete is concrete's so well known. Everyone knows how to manufacture it. You yourself could probably manufacture some concrete in your yard right now with a cement mixer. So it's easy to produce. It's low cost. It's available everywhere. So the challenge, of course, is if you're producing this type of alternative, how do you then get it much more widely available? So it'll take a little bit of time. But it's one of the most successful alternatives, and certainly it's being shipped globally. The challenge, of course, is shipping concrete's never the best thing because it's so heavy. So that takes an awful lot of carbon footprint in order to do that. So they are looking to have this production expand into different markets, so the production itself can occur locally. That's the idea of it. Is the whole idea of concrete production is it's produced using materials locally, and it's the same thing here. Limestone, recycled granite or other types of recycled aggregate, and then this bacteria that can be transferred to any location around the world, so manufacturing can be done there. So hopefully soon we will start to see this type of product available locally, but using that technology all over the world.
Thank you, Andrew. That makes sense because it might just cost more to ship concrete around the world while creating a lot more emissions. But that's great to hear. Next one. Okay, this is maybe for MCX and also for DCP. Do you have opportunities, funding, grants, or mentorship for small businesses in the Philippines?
Certainly, we do a lot of mentoring. I'm currently mentoring 2 people at the moment. So yes, we find that's probably the most effective way that we can get our message across. So certainly we have mentoring. We tend to fund in kind through the ability to market and provide sort of greater access to any initiative. So we're able to sort of provide our list of influential people that we connect with. We can get the information in front of those people. So we tend to do it through mentoring, and then also through our network is typically the way we help those types of small businesses. And of course, so getting the material into our library. If you have a material, Nature's Legacy was a great example. How we took what was an innovative use of materials, we put that into our library. That's a very effective way in which we can help those small businesses.
All right, that's great to know. So you heard it from Andrew. Get in touch and they will help. All right, so next one. This is from Grace Rosca Shimomura. I hope I pronounced that right. And you also discussed this briefly in one of your slides, Andrew. This is a question on what are the updates on biodegradable product packaging, and how do these updates tend to replace single-use plastic?
We know single-use plastic is a problem. We know it's a problem, a big problem in the Philippines, but also the rest of the world. The companies, the large corporations who are producing these single-use packages, companies like Unilever, Colgate-Palmolive, companies like that, they are keen to find solutions. At the moment, the 2 options, as you know, are recycling and biodegradability. At the moment, it depends upon where you are as to which is better. In locations in the US, we are trying to find ways in which we can recycle these materials because our recycling infrastructure is not too bad. In locations such as the Philippines, where recycling perhaps isn't as widely available, then biodegradability is a better option. There are material solutions out there. The challenge at the moment is getting them through testing and regulation, and then ensuring the low cost in terms of price. So we're starting to see breakthroughs, and a lot of the companies have made commitments. They've made commitments to 2025 in reducing the amount of material that is not recyclable reducing the amount of material which can end up as trash out there in the world. So they've made commitments, they're moving towards them. It's taking a little bit of time because these are large corporations, but expect to see some widely publicized breakthroughs, I would say probably in the next 1 or 2 years. I think also, is it not also beholden upon us as consumers to take a certain amount of responsibility for it as well? Yes, we are using the product. Can we not find better ways of disposing of it? Can we not find a way in which we can make sure that these things do not end up out there in the environment, that are collected in some way, or just simply just disposed of more carefully? I think, it is everybody's responsibility, but we can't just say that the brands need to solve this for us. We're the ones purchasing it. We're the ones using it. We also need to have a hand in that solution. So the brands are moving forward. I would say 1 to 2 years before we start seeing better solutions which are either biodegradable or much more easily recyclable. But let's also lend a hand and make sure that we can keep some of that stuff off the street. Here in Brooklyn, in the United States, I must admit, it saddens me because we're not great with trash. There's trash all over, on the streets. We're not very clean. I wish we had a greater responsibility for our own trash. So it happens all over the world. I think that's maybe it's just a human failing. Maybe we're just a little bit lazy, but still, I think we do have a certain responsibility as well as the big brands.
Thank you, Andrew. But I mean, it could also be education, because there are some areas where it's not fully communicated, what the effects of plastic are. And sometimes it's also, maybe in the local context, it's like, it's the only thing that's available. So it's also a matter of, I guess on our side, it's a matter of making other options available for our people. And that is a discussion that we could get into, but yeah, that's a whole other discussion.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Another one. Okay. Also, just let me know if we have enough time, DCP guys. Another question: did this pandemic influence the future of materials?
Great question, and definitely yes. I think through supply chain challenges, through scarcity of certain materials, through a number of people just thinking, I had this idea for many years. The pandemic has caused me to think differently. I'm going to start, So I think it's caused a lot of us to change the way that we think. Designers, manufacturers, inventors. I think we've understood that our life here on this planet is a lot more fragile than we used to think. And the decisions that we make do have consequences. Whether it's as simple as just deciding to put something in the trash or not, but also deciding whether to come up with a carbon-eating cement, to decide to design with an end of life in mind, to design thinking about all of the people that you are going to use your product. I think the pandemic has caused us. We want to get back to normal, but it's never going to be the same. It's never. We have a level of, understand the level of fragility. We are a lot more fragile, and I think a lot more aware of that fragility as well. So I think that is a good thing, because it makes us have think twice about any decision that we make, that it has consequences. And I think we will design differently as a result. And I think the material choices we make will be different as a result. It's a good thing. And unfortunately, it was a thing that needed to kill a lot of people in order to have us wake up and think differently. But I think it is going to be good in the future, because I think this isn't going to be the last pandemic or natural disaster that affects the world. There's going to be more of them, and they're going to be more regular. So we need to design and think and use materials accordingly.
Thank you, Andrew. That's so true, so relevant. Maybe it was the Industrial Revolution where we thought humans are number one, but in fact, we have to coexist, and we always have to take care of this planet. Mars is maybe 100 years away. So this is our home. We have 18 minutes left. Okay. So yeah, maybe I'll go through another, maybe 3 more questions. Okay, follow-up question from Butch. Hi. Okay, as Andrew pointed out, we don't have a lot of high-tech materials in the Philippines. We basically utilize mostly locally available natural materials, but there has not been a lot of R&D conducted. Is there an international database or platform for knowledge exchange which centralizes all the research on natural materials that have been done or are in the pipeline? Wow.
That's a very good question. I would love to say yes, and here's the link to the website. There isn't. There tends to be individual websites within countries that are, but also let's not, there are, academically, there's a lot of research going on into these natural materials, and within universities and colleges within the Philippines, and all over the world. So, I've seen the research. I've been to some of the college campuses and looked at the research. So I've seen that. So I know it exists, and there's some really quite high-tech research going on for these natural materials. The difference is, the challenge is, how do you get from academia into a viable product? I think that's the challenge we have. There is a lot of research and a lot of understanding about what natural materials can do. What we don't have, or what we're lacking, is how do we take that research and that understanding from that academic group? How do we then take that and then profit by it by manufacturing a product? Now, I will admit, the United States is probably one of the best in the world at doing this. Of taking research and then making a product, basically being entrepreneurial and making a product out of it. It's a different mindset. I didn't have it coming from England, from the United Kingdom, a lot less entrepreneurial. But I think you need to have an entrepreneurial mindset, and in the same way that we talked about with diversity, get a group of people together who have different experiences and see whether they can work together to solve this problem. I think the challenge is taking that academic research, because it is there. There is information out there, and there are solutions out there. It's how do you then apply it to a business need. I think that there you don't have that website. I don't think that really exists. And if anyone can correct me on that, I would love for you to tell me. If in the chat you can provide any links to websites where you feel like this. So I don't know of them, but if you do, please do provide that information, because I think there are so many opportunities that can be had from profiting from academic research, because the information's there, the research is there. It's just that there isn't a central location which provides that resource and then enables designers and business people to then take that and potentially create new businesses out of it.
Thank you so much. That was a lot, and that's so true. I mean, even as Cebu, a creative city of design, we have so many ideas, but yet there's always that need for someone who is the entrepreneur, who has to see it become from an idea into a sustainable business, because then that's really how you move forward. Do we have time? Is that okay? Just let me know if we're out of time. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, from Anonymous. Who is this? From Anonymous. In the Philippines, the preparation for battling COVID-19 virus is still ongoing. The need for health materials, such as swabs, is high due to continuous running out of stock. Is it possible to develop these types of products using the introduced technology and the type of materials that you source locally? Oh, that is quite a question.
Mm-hmm. In theory, yes, there are solutions. I work with the Thai government and the people from Thailand, and they are relatively good at solving some medical challenges using materials. They actually got this one material which is used in brain surgery that actually comes from cow bone. So, so I think there are ways of solving this, and there are other solutions than simply just the synthetic, the plastic medical pieces that we've used natural materials for many, many years. Yes, of course, plastic materials are simpler and often less expensive, but when it comes to local sourcing, perhaps not so widely available. Yes, there are alternatives. We have used them for many years. It's just, I think it's just they've come out of fashion. So if I would sort of it's not an easy one to solve, because I mean there are various different needs, but certainly just because the newest version happens to be plastic and produced from and manufactured from a world away doesn't necessarily mean it's the best solution. It just happens to be the cheapest and the most widely available because that company was very good at marketing and distributing it. There are many solutions for current medical challenges that are using existing materials. They've just fallen out of fashion. So I think And many, of course, which are sterilizable, clean, useful, and then, of course, biodegradable because they come from a natural source. So it's hard to answer specifically, but yes, we were solving medical challenges with non-plastic materials for many, many years before the plastic came along. And I think it's just because the big corporations are much better at marketing and distributing them that we ended up using these new materials, not necessarily that they were better.
That is so true. And maybe this is also a challenge to the researchers in the audience. If you have ideas, then, I mean, please feel free to share it with us.
Yes, as a good example was, one thing, we wrap our food in plastic wrap. That plastic wrap is single use, gets thrown out. There are many wax-based solutions, cloth-based solutions where you can wrap your food and keep it fresh, and then reuse that product from it's using wax, which is always using certain types of natural cloth. So just because plastic wrap was easily available and distributed widely, we started using it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the right solution, and it doesn't mean it's the best solution. So there are many older alternative solutions which work just as well. It's just they weren't marketed, they weren't sold and marketed in the way that our current solutions are. It's a lot of the time we buy the stuff that's right there, and because it's got a big, bright, shiny sign on it and telling us how amazing it is. It doesn't mean it's the best solution. It's just because we tend to be lazy and we're suckers for something new. So I think that's one of the challenges we have, is that not every time is the new plastic version the better option.
That's so true. And we shouldn't always just take whatever is available immediately. I mean, I guess with the internet now, we can always do research and,
Yes,
exactly. The cloth,
yes.
the cloth wrap is so
much.
much.
To make that choice, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It should be a conscious effort. Exactly. Mm-hmm. We have, 10 minutes left. We go into a more global perspective. What are the current materials that are making a spotlight, or what are the current materials that are trending now in the design industry?
I would say a lot of it is natural materials. I'm just doing a project for a footwear manufacturer, and we're looking at leather. And there's such a range of non-leather and non-synthetic materials out there as options. I was counting the number of different mushroom leathers we have now, and it's it's more than on one hand. It's probably 7 or 8 different potential solutions using mushroom leather. We've got apple leather, rhubarb leather, we've got cactus leather, we've got all sorts of different ones. That to me is what's exciting for a lot of designers now. How do I manufacture things which still look great, still have the same sort of performance, but come from a natural source, a different natural source? And to talk up about that natural source as well. You don't really want to talk about something when it's just, oh, this is great, this is made of plastic. No one really likes that idea anymore. Maybe 50 years ago, something made out of plastic was an innovation and wonderful and new. Now, it's thought of as a negative. So how do I produce products that are not made of plastic? And what are the different sources I can use? And, with leather's a very widely used material. So it has, in order to solve the problem, you've got to have huge volumes. But if I can produce that leather from 15 different types of natural materials, then I don't need to have any one material solving all the problems. For wall panels, I can use certain material. For sneakers, for footwear, I can use a different material. For my bag, I use a different material. So for upholstery for cars, I use a different material. So all can use different sources. They don't all need to use cow leather or kangaroo leather. So I'm excited by natural materials. And I think a lot of designers are as well. And it gives them a level of confidence, of just comfort. When, if you're designing using a plastic, which you don't really like, but you kind of design because that's what you have to do, then it doesn't make you feel proud about the design. If you're designing around a material that you found, that you have a special connection to because maybe you talk to the manufacturer and you understand their process and you believe in their vision, then designing based upon that material, it's so much more exciting, and you can feel so much more pride about that. So I think natural materials give us our pride back when it comes to designing. I think a lot of designers are excited about that. Waste materials, of course, that's always what I believe in. I think people are using and understanding that waste materials can come as clean and nice and neat and just look just as good as virgin materials. So I think waste materials as well. And I think trying to think what else apart from those two solutions. I think those are the two main ones I think people are excited about. You know, they're also, you know, designers also always love what's new. So, you know, you've got the high-tech solutions, whether it's graphene, whether it's anything from nanotech, those type of things. The challenge is they're perhaps a little harder to design with because they are such high-performance, high-tech solutions that it requires a corresponding high-tech design. And I think that can sometimes reduce the creativity that you have. So I think, although there is a desire, there's always been desire for high-tech and new and the very scientific, I think it's been less interested in that now, because I think people are understanding that high-tech no longer has, high-tech for simply just for its own sake is no longer the best solution out there. We need to be more considerate, more, you know, think about more diversity, more universal design, and to think sort of more about how do we design for real people and for everybody, rather than simply just for the ones who can afford the most and are just interested in high tech. So high tech used to be, I think, an important one for designers, perhaps a little less now.
Yeah, and just going back to inclusivity and diversity in design, a lot of design solutions can be made by just looking at the local materials and what's really readily available in that area. If you just, you know, talking about leather, talking about mushroom leather, I feel like mushroom is such an underrated material. It should be explored even more. There's so many applications, not just leather, but like packaging material, and of course it biodegrades, right? In the Philippines, we have also piña leather, which is basically upcycled from waste material, and it goes back into the circularity, and also at the same time providing economic growth for the local communities. And, you know, this is the ideal world that we wish to create.
Yes.
Yes. All right. How much time? Okay, 5 minutes left. We have time for one more question. Okay, I guess this one. So about recycling and waste materials. So of course, there's beauty in waste, and we can always use waste as a resource. How does MCX deal with recycling waste materials, and what are your current projects dealing with it?
As in, so our waste, so I'm not quite sure. And so our waste materials, as in, we don't produce anything. We're an information resource, so we don't really have materials that we can recycle. But I will say that what we do when working with brands who have an interest in recycling material, I'm working with a company that produces chocolate. They produce chocolate, and they are interested in what to do with the agricultural waste materials from the husks of the cocoa beans. Okay, there's a whole big husk that you have to remove. So what we do is we first of all understand the properties of the material. Okay, because you know, you need to know what you can do with it before you can work out what the application could be. So, you know, what is it? What format is it? Is it fibrous? Is it just like a pulp? Does it absorb water? Is it hydrophobic? Does it repel water? What sort of color is it? Is it lightweight? Is it quite dense? What does it mix well with? So if you break it down to the fundamental properties of the material, don't think of it as, oh, this is waste. No, this is a fibrous, hydrophilic, lightweight material. Okay, now I've got some properties. Now I can think about what applications need those properties. And let's look at all sorts of different industries. Does the automotive industry need it? Does construction use it? So what can we find that are similar materials that could be virgin materials? What are similar materials to what we currently have that are used in applications? So currently we've got maybe a lightweight, hydrophilic, polypropylene plastic fiber used in this application. Well, you know what? My cocoa husk waste has the same properties. Can I then put it in there instead of the polypropylene? So that's what we do. That's the way we recycle. It's a case of not, oh, it's recycled cocoa husks. No, it is a fibrous, lightweight, hydrophilic material. Think about the properties. So stop thinking of it as waste. Think of it as an inherent raw material that has value and properties. Think about what they are. Think about another industry that uses some material with similar properties, and then how do I switch that out? that's the kind of way we think about recycling. Because I think sometimes you just think of, oh, this is waste, it's dirty, it's a certain type. No, it's all about material properties. Break it down to those properties, and you then can think clearly about what I can use it for. And hopefully that answered the question.
I'm sure it does. And just going back to diversity, going back to inclusivity, I mean, just getting to this whole thought process and finding those solutions already involves like a range of disciplines. It's a very multidisciplinary approach. And, you know, this always goes back to, again, diversity, inclusivity, and design is, you know, design is more than just being a designer, being someone who makes a chair or someone who creates a specific mask. It's really creating solutions for people, and as many people as we can, being as inclusive in our design solutions as much as possible.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, I teach materials to a whole range of different people, and the designers I deal with, often they are designers, they have come to design from different walks of life. Marines, mathematicians, engineers, people who realize that they have a certain skill set, but they realize that what they love to do is to design and create. I think that sort of that diversification of lived experience. So I think if you want to be a designer, also diversify your experiences. Don't just concentrate just on design. Think about what else you can learn about, who else you can interact with. Don't just interact with designers. Go out there and talk to the mathematicians, talk to the fish scientists, talk to the teachers, because from those people you'll get real insights. And because if it's just a whole bunch of designers in a room together, that's not going to solve anything, because all designers tend to have the same lived experience. So go out there into the world and call on other people, different disciplines, and learn from them. And in that way, you will become a better designer, because you'll then understand different needs and different experiences.
Thank you, Andrew. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have. I hope we do another session, because there's so much that we can discuss. Just so I can put everything into a nutshell. So design is not just being in a group of designers. So design is inclusivity, bringing in different people from different disciplines. I mean, I just try and remember Vincent van Gogh, and then he creates these artworks that were unseen at that time, but it turns out centuries after that he had like some color blindness, and this is what produced his unique artwork. So sometimes these solutions these groundbreaking solutions that you mentioned could come from a very specific set of eyes. So unfortunately, thank you, everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight. This concludes our fireside chat for today. And I hope that our discussion focusing on diversity, material innovation, and selection has enlightened you, inspired you, and also really makes you want to learn more things, research, ask your questions, bring in more people, talk to people, not just designers. And I hope you will continue to explore material and process-based solutions for a more diverse and inclusive design industry, creating solutions for not just ourselves, but for everyone. We have reached the end of our session today, but rest assured there will be future events for you to join. Before I formally close this webinar, I would like to thank Material Connection for this webinar, Design Center of the Philippines for organizing this event and having us, MATIC Hub, as partner, and the Philippine Trade Training Center as our broadcast partner. All of our participants who have joined today, thank you so much. Thank you for sending in your questions. Unfortunately, we weren't able to answer everything, but we will try to get back to you through emails. We will get back to you on those other questions that we were not able to cover. And again, for future events, future webinars, please follow at DTI, Design Center of the Philippines. And the QR code is on there on the screen. Don't forget to answer the feedback form to get a copy of the presentation and your e-certificate. It was a lovely evening. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Design Center. Thank you for everyone who sent in their answers, their questions. We're so glad to have you. We hope to see you again in the next session. So once again, thank you and have a great day.